Hello and welcome to The Need for Modern BCDR, Proven Data Protection from Metallic and Azure. Today's webinar is sponsored by Metallic and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I am excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is going to fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we will provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources, and I'd especially like to call your attention to several links from Metallic. There's one to a free trial, another to an ebook, and one more to a portfolio data sheet. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section as well. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenter, and to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. So at the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. With that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today. We have David No, who's Chief Technology Officer at Metallic. David, it's great to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for joining today. Really appreciate your time and looking forward to a great session. So,
excellent. Yeah, take it away.
Thank you. So, BCDR, right? Business Continuous Disaster Recovery, right? And how that can be addressed with Metallic and Azure, right? So Metallic, SAS service for data protection, Azure, of course, from Microsoft, and Cobalt and Microsoft have had a partnership for many years, and we've built upon that with this solution, and happy to talk about it today. But before we really jump in, what I'd really love to understand or get additional insight, if you see there's a poll question up there, I'd love to understand a little bit about what areas you're looking at in terms of BCDR, backup or recovery, what kind of data you're looking to protect, where it is. It kind of reflects the where you are in your digital transformation and adopting cloud resources. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment and answering this question, be fantastic. We'll give everyone a few seconds here. But it's something that comes up a lot with customer conversations. Everyone's in a different place with their digital transformation, where they are in their journey to the cloud, how they're adopting cloud resources, what they've started with, and then the considerations that come along with those decisions, and where they are in that journey. So we have people a few more seconds here. Some great, interesting results as well. And so, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of factors to consider, which we'll touch on over the course of this webinar in the next about 40 minutes or so. So happy to consider all inputs here. Just a few more seconds for people. All right, great. So, what's very interesting to me, let's take a look at the results here. What's really interesting to me is that protecting data on premises is the winner, but not by a large margin, right? There's a good distribution of priorities across cloud and SaaS applications, and the distinction between cloud and SaaS, I think, is really cloud is things like infrastructure, right? IaaS, other PaaS services that are in, say, Azure or another cloud. where SaaS apps are like Microsoft 365, right? Salesforce, Dynamics 365, true SaaS services that encompass some functionality along with the delivery capability as SaaS as well. So this is not super unexpected. I think the drivers that we've been talking about are apply broadly to all of these. One thing that's really interesting is that SaaS data is something that people don't realize often that still needs to be protected, right? There's a question of, hey, I'm adopting a SaaS service. Why do I need to do anything? It's the SaaS provider's responsibility to do that. We'll cover that in a little bit as well. So thank you to everyone for providing those responses, and I think it reflects how everyone has a great mix, right? And that we think also that on-premises needs are not going away, and it's something that'll be there. Most customers will operate in a hybrid mode for quite some time to come, and you'll see that some of those strategic decisions that we've made that reflect that. So one of the most important things to understand up front is, what do we mean by modern BCDR, right? Why is it modern, right? And in the past, what we talk about, and now even so, we talk about the threats that we're defending against when we talk about backup and disaster recovery and what have you, right? What is it that we're protecting against? What are the threats? And when we're on premises, those threats are traditionally and mainly things like hardware failure, accidental loss, some sort of hardware corruption or administrative error. We're talking about data center disaster, right? What happens if there's a fire or flood or power outage? And in that transition to the cloud, those things change, right? Because the responsibilities for those things move away from you. If you look at the roles and responsibilities in that relationship, those things move generally to the cloud provider. What happens if a disk fails or an array goes down or a server or a rack goes down? Availability is all in the domain of that SaaS or IaaS provider, right? But still, right, the changes or the threats that we're talking about here that we're defending against are things like, and really because they have transformed over the past few years, they're top of mind for everyone across all environments, right? Cloud and on-prem and SaaS apps. And those threats are things like ransomware, right? Ransomware is the easy one that everyone just kind of talks about. But even more challenging than ransomware are things like supply chain attacks and administrative breaches through things like phishing, right? Compromise of privileged accounts, whether it's on a singular basis, like one person gets compromised, or you're broadly attacked, right? And all of your administrative accounts are compromised. And then actually the most challenging thing to defend against is a malicious insider, someone who's unhappy with privileges, generally has the power to do a great deal of damage, right? These challenges are multiplied by the multiple platforms that are adopted today, both on premises and the cloud and SaaS apps. And so our data is spread across any number of places, right? Creating new silos. I think everyone has done a good job over the past few years of consolidating data and data management in their own data centers. But now we're seeing data flow out of customer controlled data centers to Azure, to other cloud resources, to Office 365 and others. And so that makes for a much broader attack surface, and it's very difficult to manage all those things. On top of the fact that we're all struggling with the challenge of having enough people, right? Having enough people to take care of what we need to take care of for critical line of business items, as well as data protection and security and BCDR strategies. And the nature of these technologies is always that you have to have a lot of expertise, right, to understand how and what the best practices are to protect your data, specifically related to where it is, right? And not only getting enough resources, but finding the right resources of that expertise is really, really challenging, right? So how do we address that? And I think there are a few critical use cases that we really have to pay attention to, right? And they all relate to where the data is, because where the data is really dictates how you protect it and what the best ways to do that are. Right. First, of course, is on-premises data. Again, the winner. How do we protect on-premises data in the face of cyber attack? Right. Cloud is a very good strategy to adopt. Like, how do we get data to the cloud? How do we protect data from on-prem to the cloud? There's a question around air gap. How do we create an air gap between our production assets on premises and some secondary backup location or what have you, right? So using cloud in that manner is important. How do you protect data that's already in the cloud, right? Now that customers have moved data and workloads to the cloud, the patterns change, right? So the patterns change in terms of what's best practice, what are the considerations, right? The overwhelming driver of architecture in the cloud is usually egress, right? So how do you architect for that? How do you understand the best practices around that? How do you architect for recovery while maintaining resilience against the attacks that we've talked about? And then finally, SaaS applications. What do we have to do with those? And the important thing to remember with SaaS apps is there is a shared responsibility model, which every SaaS provider publishes, but doesn't always really socialize well. And that is, they are responsible generally, like in the overall case, the SaaS provider is responsible for service uptime and availability and resilience, right, to things like hardware failure, right, data center failure. What they are not responsible for is actually your data, right? Is your data compliant? Are you following the requirements of your industry for data protection and having a backup? Because the backups provided by the SaaS providers usually do not satisfy those kinds of needs. Do you have long-term retention capability in a cost-effective manner? Can you protect against ransomware? Right there, when we look at some SaaS applications, right, the first thing they usually say is, if there's a ransomware attack, what do? You verify your third-party backup, right? So it's something that is not well known. A lot of people think, oh, I'll send my data to the cloud and forget about it. Everything's fine. But it's not. It's fine until you're attacked, and then you have to recover. And by then it's too late. So these three use cases for protecting data are really the ones to look at carefully, particularly in the context of security, right? And looking at a new data protection method. And so, how do we address these needs? And so Cobalt, of course, has been a leader in the data protection space for many years. We've been in the upper right-hand quadrant of the Gartner Magic Quadrant for enterprise data protection for, I think, the past 11 years, which is the entire time that Magic Quadrant has existed. So we've always been a leader in the space. We have large enterprise experience, right? We are very used to ensuring that everything is highly performant, that we're very scalable, that everything is very secure, and we can index and restore data just as quickly as we can back it up, or even faster, and that we have extremely broad support. And so we took that experience and that technology, and we built a native cloud service to deliver that technology to our customers in SaaS, right? So we took the best of SaaS, which is easy to use, easy to try, easy to buy, very scalable, low to no deployment or overhead required, right? And combine that with Commvault's technology and produced Metallic. So Metallic enjoys the benefits of that technology portfolio. Metallic has very broad platform support, right? From the new edge, which I would call the on-premises data center, to the cloud and in between. Metallic enables workload mobility. So, the whole point of enabling or supporting all of these platforms is to be able to enable our customers to choose the right deployment method for the workload that they're using. So whether that's on premises in the cloud or SaaS, they don't have to worry about whether their data protection supports it, because Metallic does, right? In all of those platforms and locations. you don't want to think about your data protection when you're making a production technology decision, and that's what we enable. Our technology and our service have been recognized in the industry through various awards and recognition. Really, the most important thing to me and to everyone at Metallic is that our customers give us fantastic feedback. That they sleep better at night because of our service that we provide. That's why we go to work every day, and that's the most important validation of them all. So I mentioned that Metallic has, the best of SaaS built into it, right? Reduced footprint, breadth of coverage, simplified management, all of those things that you would associate with SaaS. One of the most important things, and by the way, proven capabilities because we're built on Commvault. One of the most important things we talk about though is air gap security, right? And I think if we look at, back to the definition of modern BCDR, right? I think beyond just, the threats that we talk about, right? It's the convergence of security and data protection, right? That is not to say that, we're an antivirus scanning platform or anything like that, but data protection is an integral part of a company's security posture, end to end, right? That has to take into account preventing breaches, right? Firewalls, antivirus software, others, good network security, all the way to early detection and recovery, right? And that latter part is where we come into play. We'll talk about that some more. But that air gap capability, and when I say air gapped, I mean a virtual air gap, right? That's a critical component, along with the immutability of the backups, to ensure that your data is ready to be restored whenever you need it to be, regardless of the type of attacker or loss that you've experienced, right? Backup is only as good as what you can restore, and that is, of course, one of our top priorities. The platform is broad, right? We support SaaS applications. We have our hybrid cloud data protection portfolio. We call it hybrid cloud because it protects data in the cloud or on premises or on multiple clouds, right, or different clouds. And we also have our endpoint data protection, of course, for laptops and desktops. We also have a few other services that I'll touch on as well. We have cloud storage that you can purchase from us. That is managed cloud storage, totally isolated from a security standpoint from our customers' environments. It provides that extra layer of immutability and ransomware capability on top of all of the other services we provide. And then to the early detection recovery portions as well that I touched on. We have machine learning for anomalous activity, as well as built-in cyber deception technology. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit, but that speaks to the convergence of security and data protection here. So the portfolio, like I said, is broad, right? Everything from SaaS services to VMs on premises on the cloud, different hypervisors, right? VMware. We can support AVS. We can support Kubernetes for more modern deployment scenarios. We have wide database support, everything from legacy Oracle deployments all the way up to the latest PaaS databases, right? Cosmos DB, for instance, right? And then, of course, things like file and object backup, again, more table stakes, but again, all the way from old versions of Windows and Linux all the way up to Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, right? So we really enable customers to pick and choose the platforms that they need for the workloads they want to deploy, while not having to change the data protection capabilities that they have. So really future-proofing investments in your technology in the data center, and giving you a growth path. We can grow with you, right? Depending on where your data is and how you want to protect it as it moves to the cloud and beyond. That data mobility is really important, right? So being able to do on-premises backup, for instance, and recover to cloud is a critical component, because there's always a transition time, for instance, for those workloads. And it's something that is quite important from a compliance standpoint as well. I mean, if your backups are there, you're moving to cloud, do you really want to maintain a huge amount of on-premises resources as well for recovery if you need it? So we can do things like backup VMware on premises, and then if you need it, we can restore and convert on the fly to Azure VMs, right? You can do that conversion within the software, change whatever network parameters you need to change, or the VM name, deployment. It's all there, and so we can do those conversions for you. It's important because with the introduction of cloud, data centers no longer kind of static, right? Typically, data center technology and deployments go through some big wave of change, like virtualization, right? Everyone went from physical systems to virtualized platforms and clusters. No one really went backwards or thought about it. Just about everything is virtualized, right? Cloud, though, is different because now what happens is every workload you deploy, you think about whether that should be on premises or in the cloud. And that decision is not static, right? You consider that all the time, every 6 months, every year, even every quarter. Because this workload really makes sense for us on-prem. Should we bring it to the cloud? Yeah. Is there data we need on premises from workloads in the cloud? Maybe, right? But this flexibility is something that Metallic gives you no matter where you are in the journey, and allows you to, like I said before, we can grow with you in terms of how much you have on-prem, how much you have in cloud, or how those workloads flex. And we can do that because of our architecture, right? So we like to talk about Metallic as being composed of a control plane and a data plane, right? The control plane, which comprises the service itself, right? What is it? How do we authenticate? How do we manage metadata? All of those things. Where's the UI? That's in the cloud, fully managed, right? It's a full SaaS service. We take care of everything involved, right? When we start talking about how we protect data and where we store backup data, then it becomes very much specific to the type of data we're protecting, right? For things like SaaS applications, our offerings for, say, Microsoft 365, they're all inclusive. Same thing with Salesforce, same thing with Dynamics 365. They include the storage and they include all the compute and all the other infrastructure that's required. It's super simple to configure. It's all included in the price. And so, it's very easy to set up. It's a 4-step wizard to configure access to the application, and then we will protect it, and we're responsible for everything, right? Very, very simple. When you start talking about things like on-premises workloads and workloads in the cloud, IaaS and PaaS and other services, then it's very important to remember that it is critical to have a backup copy of the data close to your production data, right? So for on-premises, that means having a backup copy on-premises. For cloud, it means being in a cloud storage location that's close to your production data. And that's really for rapid restore and recovery. So our architecture on the data plane side allows us to do things like let's say you have an on-premises VMware cluster, right, that you want to protect. We can deploy a few lightweight components on-prem or even our Hyperscale X appliance to be able to store a full local copy of backups on premises close to your production workloads. It's not a cache. It is a backup copy. You can control retention, keep 1 or 2 weeks of data on premises, but still allow you to also and easily configure a copy in the cloud for that offsite air-gapped copy, longer retention, super resilient copy that's not on your premises, right? And so we can do that with cloud workloads as well. You can have a backup of your Azure workloads in a local Azure blob storage container, or blob storage account, and then you can have a secondary copy, to cool storage, for instance, for longer term retention. And this sounds pretty complicated, and it can get that way. But what we've done is we've leveraged our experience in order to bring all the best practices that we've developed over the years into the Metallic experience itself. So we guide you step by step on how to do these things. There are smart defaults in place. We advise you of the best configurations to avoid egress. We warn you if we think there could be egress in a particular config. These are things that are all built into the service that make it very easy to get up and running quickly, right, and really realize the value of your investment. So with all-inclusive SaaS, the name of the game is TCO, right? Other than security, which is obviously top of mind, but being able to really realize the value of your SaaS service in terms of scalability, in terms of much less overhead and of management, of planning, of ongoing maintenance, right? We take care of all of that. Even for components you might have to deploy locally, we'll take care of upgrades and updates completely automatically, right? We'll make sure that the service is up and running. We'll make sure that the storage is up and running, available for you in the case of things like Metallic Recovery Reserve, right? All of that, and deployment is super easy. It's guided with wizards, and it's a few clicks. Really take you to being able to configure more complex scenarios without a lot of pain, and that's really quite important. Of course, security, I mentioned, is top of mind, and there are two ways to look at this, right? One is the service itself secure, right? We're protecting customer data, right? How do we ensure that we can be resilient to direct attack on the service? And we do that with a variety of ways, right? First, we have based our architecture on a zero trust approach, right? So all of the controls are in place. We have multi-factor authentication. The service is completely isolated in many different ways. And the easiest way to sum that up is in terms of our certifications, right? We have our ISO 27001 2013 support. It's actually ISO IEC 27001 2013. We also have our SOC 2 Type 2 certification reports. But even more broadly, right, we have a government offering, which runs on Azure Government, right? Not everyone has those levels of security requirements. But we're the only FedRAMP High Ready service, actually we're in progress now, that's available in the market for data protection. And so those 421 controls that are part of FedRAMP High, the vast majority of those controls are also implemented on the commercial side, right? For everyone else who doesn't have that kind of security requirements for their data. And so that's how seriously we take our security and ensuring that Metallic itself is safe from attack. It's a global service, and so for that also we're compliant with data residency laws. So we have a GDPR statement, right? We have locations around the world to satisfy data residency in just about every region. We have PCI DSS certification. We are HIPAA compliant, so we'll sign a BAA. We can handle healthcare data. So all of those things are part of the service, and we continue to enhance all of those things, right? So how do we enhance customer security, though, right? That's the other lens. How does the implementation of Metallic help with customer security? The first and primary way is that we do implement that isolated virtual air gap. And what do we mean by air gap, right? Obviously, we need network connectivity, so it's not, again, the traditional air gap that people talk about. So in a modern sense, what we're making sure of is that attacks on our customers' environments or breaches of our customer environments can't make the leap to the Metallic service itself, right? We do that in a variety of ways. One is that our communications are always protected. So certificate-based authentication, encryption, compression, deduplication on the wire and at rest. And we have fully separate security domain from our customers' environments. So even if a customer is completely compromised, their AD was compromised, they don't trust any of their administrative accounts, that does not affect the Metallic infrastructure at all, right? So we're there and available for customer recovery. In addition, we can also help with early detection of malicious activity. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but that is another critical piece, right? Because what's important about the approach that we take here is that we do not look for things like virus signatures, right? You already do that. Everyone has an antivirus solution in place of some sort. But what that can't detect are things like a malicious administrator poking around, not even doing anything malicious yet, right? Like deletion or encryption or exfiltration of data, but even just doing a little exploring and being tempted by checking out the environment for something that he or she is not responsible for. So how do we detect that kind of thing, right? Beyond signatures, right? And looking for traces of infiltration, right? And that's where we talk about extending data protection beyond backup, right? I talked earlier about the convergence of security and data protection, where the definition of data protection is expanding. On top of the fact that these days it's everyone's responsibility to implement security, right? Whether you're an end user, right, an end user where you're like, don't click on that bad link in the email, all the way to your IT administrators, your CISO, your security teams, right? It's everyone's job to help with security in some way. So when we talk about that, of course, we have the backup environment, which is fully secure from attack, right? As much as we can make it. And that means that recoverability is very much prioritized, right? And that, of course, is kind of the first consideration we're looking at a data protection service. But then we have the ability to implement machine learning algorithms, which really look at anomalous activity. And what do we mean by anomalous activity, right? That's that middle section with security IQ. We can learn patterns of access, patterns of change, even patterns of load and utilization in order to understand what the kind of day-to-day normal is for customers. And we can alert in big changes, right, that we see that are outside the norm. Things like backing up an unusually large amount of files, which could indicate encryption, or seeing a large amount of data being moved from one place to another, or looking at unusual VM CPU utilization, right? These are things that we look at and can send alerts to security teams or administrators to give them a view of this anomalous activity that we've noticed. We can also tell you what your last known good backup is before that anomalous activity was detected, and we present all the controls in place too and recommendations for configuring the data protection environment to be as secure as possible. We do all of this from what we call our Security IQ dashboard, right? We integrate all of those into Security IQ for an easy way to see all these things at a glance. The next stage after that is actually is even more interesting, right? And that is what we call ThreatWise. This is our cyber deception technology. And what is cyber deception, right? If you consider today that if someone breaches your environment, right, the first thing that they're going to try to do is move laterally. They're going to explore your environment. They're going to see what data is out there. Oh, is there finance data somewhere? What's the SQL server? How about this Oracle server over here? What about medical devices if you're in a medical environment, or if you have IoT devices, right? How do we infiltrate those? And so everything that they can see on the network is live. It's real, right? What ThreatWise does is it allows you to deploy what we call sensors. And these sensors can mimic production systems. You can look like a SQL server or a VM. It can look like a medical device. It can look like an IoT device. It can actually look at other devices or services on your network and create a virtual copy of them, like mimic them, right? And these are resources that should never be touched. And they do two things. One is they obfuscate your production resources. So now instead of every single resource on your network being a real resource, now it might be 50% of what's exposed is really out there. The other thing they can do is they can sense activity that is not related to like virus signatures, right? We're really looking at behaviors. Was a sensor triggered or touched when it should never be touched? Who triggered it, or who poked around at it? We can even do things like allow people to log into these sensors, and they look like a SQL server, for instance. They can look like your backup infrastructure, right? These are all things that we can simulate and understand and sense, as well as report on and conduct forensics. What were the patterns? Who did it and when? How frequently did they explore? What did they do? We can even do things like detect file exfiltration. Like if someone is stealing data, right? We have sensors that can be put on as files and file shares. And even after they copy the data out, if someone goes through and now reads and touches that data and they touch one of our sensors, then we'll tell you that your data has been exfiltrated. So early detection is really the name of the game, right? How do we keep customers from, how do we keep attacks from being, from going on for an extended period of time, limit their impact radius, which then really leads to how do we minimize the amount of data that you have to recover. Okay? So really great broad security capabilities, along with the air gap and the metallic recovery reserve managed storage that is completely isolated from any customer access other than through our service, right? Our security strategy is a critical one for us, and you'll continue to see innovations in that arena. So in conclusion, right, Metallic provides not only what you would consider data protection from kind of a traditional sense, backup and recovery. We're best in class at doing that right across a wide variety of platforms, a wide variety of applications. So you don't have to rely on point solutions. You can rely on one service delivered as SaaS to protect your data wherever it lives. But we also provide for significant security benefits as well, making sure that that your data protection service is itself protected from attack, does not have any vulnerabilities from your own environment being compromised, and can even warn you of attacks on your environment or in your environment as early as possible. And really, that's the thing. We enable the data mobility, as I mentioned before, and flexibility of recovery, all in a modern SaaS delivered service with all the benefits of ease of use and ease of deployment and scalability. So, go check out our website at metallic.io. There's a ton of information there. There are videos, there are white papers, there are additional resources, and you can sign up for a free trial as well. So thank you very much. And with that, I will hand it over for questions, I think.
Okay. Yeah, super. David, really interesting presentation. So we've got a couple of questions coming in here from the audience. There's one here about MultiCloud, in asking about, restoring Azure to Google, and I wanted to ask, given that, you guys have so much flexibility in terms of, both what you help people back up and what the targets are, what do you guys recommend when it comes to MultiCloud? If somebody's got a workload running on Amazon, is it recommended generally to do the backup to Amazon as well, or is that a case where you want to have the data sort of secure somewhere else and then bring it back to Amazon when it's back up?
Yeah.
What do you see people do?
It's a really good question, and it comes back to what multi-cloud means. And I think that it's very easy to say multi-cloud. Oh, I have a copy of my data in Azure, and I have a copy of my data in AWS. So if Azure goes down, then I have it in AWS, right? Yeah. The reality is very different, right? Because that is superficially a good idea. But when you really look at it, there are a number of things that come into play. One is it really realistic to have your entire environment replicated in another cloud, right? In an active passive fashion? Are you going to set up all the associated networking and security configurations? And all of that has to be considered as well, not just your data in another place. Egress is a significant driver. It's very expensive to move your data or even keep a backup copy of your data from one cloud to another. Really what you want to do, and it goes back to, what are you protecting against? Are you protecting against the cloud provider itself going down? And if you are, is it worth it to cover the couple hours at max that it's going to be down? Because if it's really down globally, then we should probably all find our families, because the cloud providers spend right $100 billion a year on resilience, and if something that
Yes.
big happens, right, we're in trouble. So,
Right.
so it's right. So if you take a realistic view of what multi-cloud means, then that means the workloads, we can support workloads if they're running in one cloud or another, right? It's
Yep.
not a good idea to move the data to another cloud unless you have the highest of uptime requirements. So yeah, our default recommendations are to protect Azure data in Azure, AWS in AWS, right? And make sure that we can recover as quickly as possible within those respective clouds. That's the best
Okay.
practice.
Gotcha. And there was a question that came up here too about air-gapped backups, and I'm really interested to know how that works. Like say you've got the Azure data for your application. You want to back it up also in Azure. How do you guys ensure that air gap within that data so that the backup isn't affected by whatever hits
Absolutely.
the original data?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also goes back to kind of a legacy definition of air gap versus what the modern definition of air gap is and what you're defending against, right? It's always what problem are you trying to solve, not what is the solution, right? So if we talk about air gap, what are we protecting against? It's, breach of a customer environment from making it to the data protection environment, right? And to that end, right, of course, it's a virtual air gap where we are not physically disconnected, right? We have a network connection. We kind of have to, right? And so, even though there's a network connection, right, all of the connections are authenticated. It's always outbound from our customer environments over port 443. It's always encrypted traffic. It's a proprietary protocol. It is, and the security domains are completely separate, right? So the data is encrypted and obfuscated on the wire and at rest. And so all of these controls, which are detailed in our SOC and ISO reports, and if you have federal data, then we have our FedRAMP ATO documentation as well. All of those controls contribute to the division between customer environments and Metallic, and how those things are separated and how we maintain separation.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that. Thanks for that explanation. I appreciate that. Next question it comes from Kartik, and it's a good question. You've talked about a lot of different sources that you guys can back up, and a lot of different targets. Obviously, the name of this presentation is about Metallic and Azure, but the question is, the solutions you provide, are they applicable only to Azure, or does it work for AWS and other clouds as well? And I think you talked about that a little bit, but probably good to
Sure.
to go through it a little more.
Yeah, really good question. And one of the things I touched on earlier is that we protect data wherever it is. And it's one of the things where we can't tell you where to put your data or run your workloads. We protect your data where you choose to do those things. And so, for instance, we're the only SaaS provider, a SaaS data protection provider who can protect Azure, AWS, and Oracle today, right? OCI, as well as on premises. So we can protect your data wherever it is. Today, we do not have a support yet for Google, but we do have Azure, AWS, and OCI.
OCI. Okay, super. Yeah, and on that SaaS side, obviously Metallic itself is a SaaS tool, but then you also have the SAS Protection, which is so interesting. And I wonder, it sounds like you've got a lot of IP there in backing up Microsoft 365 and Dynamics 365 and Salesforce. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the things that you do with those SaaS platforms, beyond what people can do sort of themselves from the native tools.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, every platform has some sort of native tool for data protection. You kind of have to, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But they are meant to be kind of good enough usually, or just kind of like check the box kinds of things. And so, the main thing that I'll talk about is the security, the domain separation again, right? That virtual air gap. Remember what we're protecting against, right? Is attack. one of the major things we're protecting against is attack. And the worst scenario is malicious insider. The second worst scenario is broad administrative breach, whether it's from phishing a single account or if you have like a supply chain attack, right? So in
Yep.
those circumstances, right, if you do not have your data protection solution separated from your production security domain, then that malicious activity can actually affect how you protect data, right? So you can turn off all the controls in Office 365 and others, and then go do what you want to do. Whereas you can't do that if you have a third-party data protection solution. I mean, there are all sorts of things: granularity, long-term retention, right? If we go down the nuts and bolts, we can just go point by point. The main thing is you're not protecting it against the threats you know. You're protecting against the unknown threat. And the best way to protect against the unknown threat is to make sure your data protection solution is separate, right? That's a fundamental philosophy or principle of data protection.
Okay, excellent. I've got another question here about what storage options are available, and you've gone through a lot of those, I think in the presentation. But as CTO, I'd love to hear what you're seeing in terms of what storage options are customers using. What are the trends that you're seeing? Is it more and more to public cloud infrastructure for backup, or is there sort of a surprising amount of on-premises or growing amounts of on-premises? What do you see there?
Yeah, so everything is growing, and if
Okay.
we look at the current trends, that customers are running in hybrid mode with some workloads on premises, some in the cloud, right? Leveraging cloud for unique properties and capabilities as well, right? And how we can blend those things together. So there's a move to on premises. I would say there's a move to simplicity in terms of what's easiest to deploy and use for data protection, right? A lot of our customers are opting for our appliance in that case because it's an all-in-one compute, storage, networking solution for that on-premises backup copy. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
we support any number of storage targets on premises, right? We support locally attached disk and SAN and NAS and whatever, right? Whatever you want to use, we can write to. But a lot of what I'm seeing a lot of customers doing is they're also looking at that appliance for simplicity. They're picking a SaaS solution for simplicity. The appliance works very well with that. The combination of or looking at resources in the cloud as well as on-prem, taking advantage of cloud. Absolutely, using cloud storage is key. We see a whole mix of storage, but really the most common patterns are hot replicated storage for the first backup copy in the cloud, and then second copy is probably a cool, locally redundant copy of the data in cloud storage.
Gotcha. Super.
Cost. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for that context. That's really interesting. There's a question here from Deb, which is probably a good closer for us. Deb says that she's really loving the product, but with what's the one thing that makes your product stand out? What's unique? What are the differentiators?
Deb, only one thing? Oh, that you're making it's like asking me which my children I like most. I think the most important thing that differentiates us is the breadth of our platform support. When I say breadth of platform support, not only the applications that we support, because we're not a point solution, right? We don't only protect Office 365. We don't only protect on-premises data. We don't only protect cloud VMs. You can deploy this solution to protect all of these things, and that you can realize all the benefits of Metallic across all of these platforms, and all of the application versions that you might have. I would love to say that and I bet most companies would like to say they're only running on the latest and greatest, but there's always some old Oracle database somewhere on some old version of Linux that no one likes to talk about because they can't migrate it to anything newer. And we'll support those, right? So having one solution, being able to support so much, gives our customers the flexibility of how they want to deploy their workloads and what they have in reality from a single point, minimizing their overhead of management, and giving the ability to leverage all of these capabilities across these platforms. That's what I would say with the enterprise experience that we have, right? That's one of the biggest.
Okay. Well, David, you've been really generous with your time. Appreciate all your insights here in the Q&A as well as the presentation. And thank you so much for this update on Metallic.
Well, thank you, and thanks again to everyone for spending the time with us.
All right. Okay. And so before we wrap up, we do have one more piece of business. It's the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that gift card is Andrew Lathrop from Massachusetts. So congratulations to Andrew. We'll be in touch to get you your card. This is your last warning about the handouts. You can grab any of the handouts there just before we close out. And I'll also put that link back up for the trial. But with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Metallic for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for all of your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.